Hello again there. This is Betsy Scott, the Executive Director of Programs and Engagement with the Housing Innovation Alliance. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us for today's virtual roundtable focused on process mapping tools for aligning your team to effectively drive change. We're talking about this today because a lot of people are looking at, what can we do to be more successful as we try and drive innovation within our business. And this topic has come up a lot of times when we're doing live events, and people have been asking, what is process mapping and how can I do it? And why might I want to do it? So we aligned some folks today to share their expertise with you on that front. As an organization, as the Alliance, we are focused on pursuing the affordable American dream. We think the industry needs to be more collaborative. As a group, we need to focus on delivering consistent quality and value. And really, process mapping and focusing on your processes is very closely linked to quality management. So we see this as a key tool that you would be able to use on that front. And ultimately, we want housing to be available and attainable for everyone. And for us, attainable, our focus really from a production building perspective is on that missing middle income. So the $200,000 to $400,000 home that a production builder or developer would be delivering to the marketplace that we're currently underserving as an industry. So for today's panel, expert panel, we have Michael Dickens from IBACOS. He's been doing process mapping, he'll tell you a bit more about that as well, for years in working with production builders, government manufacturers, as a consultant to driving quality, performance, and innovation within the industry. George Casey is, and Michael is our, forgive me, our vice chair of the Alliance. George is our chairman of the Alliance, and he has, I would say, 30, 40 plus years experience at the executive operations level within building and development companies, as well as a strong financial background to share his perspective. And then thirdly, as far as the guest speaker, we always like to give you guys examples from builders. So Alitia from Thrive Home Builders is going to share her personal experience during today's call on how Thrive is one of the builders that has leveraged this as a tool very effectively. And then again, I'm Betsy Scott, and I'm just going to facilitate and be watching for your questions today on this call and try and get our panelists to facilitate answers for you as well. These slides, nearly in their entirety, will be provided for you in PDF format, as well as we'll be putting together an archive of this call after it's complete. So we'll make sure that everybody who's connected to us gets that. If you do have questions as we're going along, please feel free to type those into your chat window, and we'll just watch those on an ongoing basis to make sure that we answer whatever we can for you during today's call. One last thing, I would be remiss if I did not thank our partners who helped make this possible for us. And so you can see those folks on screen. They are kind of our PBS of underwriting of our agenda. So thank you to any of you who are partners who are on this call. I'm going to turn the floor over to Michael.
Thank you, Betsy. Well, good day, everyone. Process mapping. The question came to Betsy and I at the Baltimore live roundtable. I used the phrase process mapping probably 5 times in an hour, and people said, what is it? So this is a follow-up to tell you what it is, why you do it, what impact it can have, how you do it, and then some examples. So I'm going to take the first 2. I'll go back almost 30 years. I first learned about it at GE, and Jack Welch got everyone in GE to get into workout, simplification, process mapping, commitment to quality. Didn't know what it was. Thought it was just for manufacturers, engineers to go to the nth degree. But actually, it's a very smart, very simple business tool to use for all of us. So let me dig into it. Give me the click. Why you would do it, I'll start here with this one first. Productivity. As the Alliance, we always look for ways for the builders to improve the way they deliver homes. Sadly, we're in an industry that is so big, but at the moment quite unproductive. And as this slide here shows from McKinsey, there's probably $1.6 trillion of added value we could bring to construction around the world. If you look in this country, sadly, we're almost bottom of the list of industries that have improved or not their productivity over the last 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Gone up 1.1%. It's basically flat. Why I highlight productivity, that's a way of doing things more efficiently, doing more with less. If you look at our world, housing, we've got to be more productive and do things differently if we're going to solve the affordability challenge. And again, the Alliance is fully behind that. John Burns, some of his latest data shows the criticality. The red is very unaffordable, the average home for the average person around the country. Green and yellow, obviously, quite good. Also from NHB and Wells Fargo, they did this study that showed in 2012, the average home sold could be afforded by 75% of median income families. Fast forward 6 years, 50%. So half the median household income families can't afford a home. So we've got to do something. Doing better and process mapping for me is at the heart of this opportunity. So the builders tomorrow that do things better with higher value, and we'll get into some of the financials in a moment with George. I wanted to go back.
Okay.
Have I got control?
I just got it for you.
So what is it? It's a way to do things better. If you want to increase productivity, do more with less. Process mapping is at the basis of it. You want to improve quality in a product or a service. You want to solve an issue, identify the root cause, do things faster, reduce cycle time, speed up, reduce cost, eliminate waste, increase value, delight a customer, or compete, grow, or innovate. Process mapping usually is at the base. I like this little chart, the TQM mantra, do the right things right the first time. That person there, you burn the toast, now scrape it. It's a bit like our industry delivering homes. So what is it? Here's a pictorial view of it. This is us a few years ago helping John Friesenan of Imagine Homes map and optimize part of their business. What is it? It's not rocket science. It's simply a way of understanding what you do today. It creates a picture or a way to see that yourself, because often we don't know what we do. We automatically do. But you can communicate that to others then. Ask structured questions, analyze what it is you do, envision a better way, and then create a roadmap for the change or success that you're trying to create.
So Michael, before you get into the specifics of this, where or what might a builder use process mapping to get aligned in their business? Like when would they use it?
Anytime they want to improve or change. They may want to, as I said, speed up the closing process or reduce some costs in their shell or anything they want to improve. They can use a small, it could be a one-day project. It could be, I'll show you some that really can take 6, 12 months to implement. But it's a good question. It could be small or large. The book on the right, and I'll give you some references later on. This is an excellent book, Quality Essentials. And I've abstracted just a few of what I think of generic quality, TQM kind of tools. This one here shows a problem-solving process. So if you have a problem, first define it and then start analyzing it. So I won't spend time on this, but lots of process problem-solving tools and process improvement tools highlighted in the book. This is one. Next one. Lean enterprise models. I think you've heard the last 5 years, many companies are getting into the lean way, lean formats. It's simply a way of improving. So you start at step one, and I'm going to spend more time today and with George on step 1 and 2. What's the business context? In this case, a builder might want to change. And then how do you map? If you go deeper into that, simplifying the process, managing it, measuring it, we're not going to go deep into that today, but hopefully you'll get value out of the first 2 steps. When you process map, there's some common symbols you'll use. The little ellipse there is the start or the end of a process. The steps in between the rectangles, so you'll see these throughout the process. Go to the next one, you'll start to see a simple example. Your wife or husband says, cut the grass. So you prepare, you cut it, you put the mower away. That's the simplest. If you really look at what happens when you cut the grass, you go through something like this. Open the door, pull the lawnmower out, check the gas. Does it need gas? Decision, yes, no, move on. Again, when you've mapped your process, you can now look at this and say, how do I do that better? So it's your basic plan. You can take the steps of a flow chart and then say, well, who does what? Which department or which function does one, hands it off to themselves, then moves it to function C. So again, it's a roadmap of showing who does what. A Gantt chart is a way to take many of those steps and simply put time to them. So now you can communicate what is it that's being done and when. When you've got your ideas or your issues, problems in this case, do you just intuitively pick the best ones, or do you, in this case, analyze it? So in this view, 5 people voted, 1 low, it looks like 7 high. Which are the biggest issues that we should take on? And by going through it systematically, you can see that E is the key one to take on, and let's forget C. Next. And then measurements. As you get into data collection and mapping solutions, it's important to have formal measures for success. I like to quote George's last one here. In God we trust, everyone else brings data. Again, and the other one, without data, you're just another person with an opinion. So formalizing some of your idea generation or issue identification. We'll talk about that in a moment. So with that, I've given you there some of the whys. George is going to, in a moment, talk about some of the financials. But we're going to stop throughout the webinar and see if we had any questions along the way. Type them in and feel free, and we'll answer them.
Yep, we didn't have any at the moment, but like Michael said, feel free to type them in. Also, if you ever think of anything, I know when you hear a lot of information, you often leave an event and think, oh, I wish I would have asked that. Feel free to just reach out to us with any follow-up questions, and we'd be happy to facilitate getting those answered for you as well.
And all of these presentation and reference materials at the end, we'll be sharing that with you. So George, I've given some of the why you do it. It's to improve business, often from a financial end, the real bottom line. Give us some of your views why you think process is important.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Michael. And good afternoon, everyone. And by the way, I want to do a shout out here. I see Clegg Wellborn's on the call. And Clegg actually took part in some of this about 20 years ago at Arvida's Weston. And we'll go through some of those data a little bit later in the slide. So if we could have the next slide, please. So I think you keep looking, why would you look at doing this from a financial standpoint? And really it goes back to a lot of data and research that says that if you work on customer satisfaction and cycle time reduction, those have the highest long-term market valuation. And I will actually show some of this a little bit later in real world stuff. So next slide, please. I think when I look at this, those who focus on return on assets tend to innovate and change more than those who don't. Return on assets is very simple. That if you had $100 and put it in the bank, and at the end of the year, you got $6 in interest, your return on assets would be 6%. You get $6 for the $100 you have in the bank. For a builder, return on assets is how much money you make during the year before you account for interest. So it's like pre-interest earnings divided by how much money you have invested in the business. That's your total assets in the business. So that's why, if you look at this, it's a very simple measure of how good an investment you are as a company doing things. When you look at the core drivers of return on assets, and we'll go through this in a minute, there are key things. First is higher throughput. How many houses a year you can drive through your fixed overhead. More you can do, essentially, you call this the spreading of the overhead or whatever, getting further past break even, whatever. But that's one of the key variables. The second is how you get higher margins for what you do. And the third one is how fast you can turn your capital. If you have, think of a waitress with a table. If you get a $100 bill and a 20% tip, you make 20 bucks on the table. If you turn the table once a night, you make 20 bucks. If you turn the table twice a night, you make 40. If you turn the table 3 times, you make 60. It's the same thing. If you can turn your capital in the business multiple times a year, you can make more money on that capital and have a higher return on assets. Only faster capital turns are totally in the builder's control via cycle time improvement. What you do with your margins, how many homes a year you sell, those are somewhat determined by the market itself. Now you can learn to prevail in a market, but the only thing truly within your total control is what you do with cycle time. Next slide, please. Number 4. Cycle time improvement only occurs sustainably with the improvement of core processes. And this has been proven over and over again. And someone has to own process improvement as their core job function in order to ensure success. I use the phrase, organizations tend to do the things they're organized to do. If you don't have someone whose job is to consistently drive process improvement, it doesn't get done. Next slide, please. So return on assets, as I mentioned, is the simple thing of how much money you make based on how much you have invested totally in the business. Next slide, please. And I'm going to drive you a little bit crazy, but you need to know this math. Return on assets is defined as EBITDA, which is your earnings before interest, depreciation, and amortization. So it's your earnings, how much money you make before you account for interest, divided by assets. It's composed of 2 pieces, EBITDA to sales. So that's how much you make in terms of margin on a house, net margin on your sales. And then sales to assets is how many times you're able to turn those assets in terms of sales. Next slide. So for example, here we go. If I had a profit margin of 7.4%, next slide, or next click, and I turned my assets twice a year, I would end up having a 15% return on assets. If I only return my assets 1 time a year, I'd only have a 7% return. Next slide. That thing, the return on sales, actually has 2 pieces that it makes up. One is EBITDA to gross profit. Think of this as how much of your gross profit makes it to the bottom line, makes it to your earnings. If in fact it was a number that's 100%, it would say every bit of your gross profit goes to the bottom line and there's no overhead friction at all. If it's 0, it means your overhead is chewing up all of your gross profit and none of it's making the profit. The second piece of this, if you look at the algebra, is gross profit per sales. So that is how much value you generate. gross profit to sales is an indicator of how much more people are willing to pay you for something compared to what it costs you to do things. So in this case, if I had a 21% or 22% gross profit on sales, but I'm able to run 33% of that to the bottom line, I end up with a 7.4% profit margin, EBITDA to sales. Next slide. Sales to assets, the second piece of the DuPont formula, consists of, again, two pieces. One, if you do the algebra, sales to cost of goods sold, which is, when you think about it, any of you who've worked retail, that's the markup you have on your costs. It's the same thing. It's measuring value, just like gross profit does. It's the same variables working. The second one is actually your cycle time, your COGS compared to assets. And if you can make that happen more and more, run more houses, more cost of goods sold through the same assets that you have, turning the tables faster, you get better. Next slide. So the opportunities here are pretty simple. Take your overhead down, take your value up, take your cycle time down. Do those three things and your return on assets gets better. And all of those involve a way of getting continuous improvement. If you go to the next slide. For example, on the overhead side, you can improve it by thinking about how you organize things, how much more you can put through your overhead, how productive you are in your construction overhead. Can your superintendent deliver 30 houses a year as opposed to 20 or 40 compared to 30? Because it's simpler, more organized, and so on. Keeping your facility costs and your fixed marketing within range, really focusing on your fixed and variable selling costs, and again, insurance and legal. So those are things that you can work at, but again, that's somewhat limited by what the market can do. Next slide. Strategies for value generation are more. You know, part of it is where you are in the cycle. Do you have pricing power or don't you? You know what? Is your location good? And even if that location is good, are you clean and picked up when people come through? What's your brand like? Is your site plan good or is it confusing? Your house design's good or confusing? Do you really work on customer satisfaction or not? Do you work on the things that are soft? In other words, are you able to take the people in your community and have them learn to do things together? I use the phrase as high value to the elimination of loneliness. If you can work on this, you get higher selling prices, and it's an intangible. Service and training are others. The next one. When you look to cycle time, this is where, as I said, it's totally in your control. So this is where you'd use process improvement, you'd simplify your product, you'd simplify your processes, you work on quality improvements so you're not doing things over and over again. Training, not only in-house, but of your trades. Your integration with trades. There's stories here that you can't look just inside your company to do things. How you integrate and deal with your trade contractors is important. And obviously technology, scheduling software, iPads, so on and so forth. Next page. So this is a real world example. From 20 years ago, when scheduling was really, computerized scheduling was in its infancy. Same community, delivering 800 homes a year in the community in 1997. Through process improvement and a lot of the strategies we talked about, we were able to jump the throughput to 1,500 homes a year. The revenues went from 100 million to 400 million. But the assets we did it on relatively stayed the same. When we started, the EBITDA to assets, so let's think of it, how much money our bank account was paying us, was 16.3%. By the time we were done, it was 102%. I guarantee that's pretty good. You look at EBITDA to gross profit, that's our overhead efficiency. It was 60% when we started, 77% when we were done. Our gross profit went from 22% to 37%. A lot of this was simplifying, taking things out that didn't make sense, working on process improvement with our trades. And along the way, we were able to keep pushing our prices. We also did the soft stuff. We made it a great place to live. We did a lot of stuff in the community that got people together. But the final thing, COGS to assets, that was essentially our cycle time measure, went from 0.95 to 2.31. In terminology, we went from building houses that averaged about 240 days when we started at this project, to the end we were down to less than half of that. And all of those played out to make this, a phenomenal investment, no matter which way you did it. By the way, if you were to look today at, for example, NVR, it is able to essentially bring through similar kinds of numbers in terms of overhead efficiency in the mid-70s. It's also, but you look at NVR, it's EBITDA to assets is 31%. It beats the pants off of almost every other builder's. Not surprisingly, it has the highest price earnings ratio of any builder. It's a 16 times PE. Toll Brothers, another great builder, has an EBITDA to assets of 11%. So, and its price earnings ratio ends up being 7.2. And then if you were to look at the lower end, K. Hovnanian has an EBITDA to assets of 4% and a PE ratio of 3. Next slide, please. That if you think of this, how a company is valued is directly proportional to how well it does on its return on assets. If you're looking to make your company more valuable, you would do this all day long because it pays off. So thoughts and questions?
So George, you've gone into builders, you've been hired as an operational leader with builders when they're trying to make major changes. And you've also worked with builders on a consulting basis. So when you're looking at financial angles, what are some of the other opportunities, beyond just improving a single process within a builder's organization where they might want to look at process mapping as a tool?
It really, there's two key things. Number one, in builders, almost always the easiest stuff and the most important stuff is getting the front end right. I think Lydia will talk a little bit later at Thrive that we did a process of looking at how we started houses with the goal of having every house being what we call the perfect start. That it didn't start unless all the paperwork was perfect, all the plans were perfect, and they were distributed to all the trades and everybody knew what they were doing. We also did a thing of a perfect close. Wouldn't close a house unless it was what we call bulletproof. There was no outstanding items on that house. And each of those was its own process to do. And then the final piece was in the middle between those, actually working on construction scheduling, which is a longer process, but every bit as important, but it doesn't work right unless you get the starts right. Because if you try throwing incomplete plans and information to the field, it will never work well, and it will always start and stop. So to me, inside of builders, that's always where the most valuable fruit lies, is in doing the start process, the closing process, and then the in the middle.
Perfect. Thank you. We don't have any other questions that have come in so far, so I'm going to allow you to, we'll move forward and we'll get closer to some of the builder examples, because I'm sure you're interested in hearing from Thrive in a bit. I'm going to turn the floor back over to Michael.
Thanks. Thanks, George. So I asked George to share some of that because in many ways that's the biggest why. The financial improvement, I think, of a business. And at the core is process. So how do you do it? Well, you learned earlier about cutting the grass. I'm sitting in a IBACOS conference room here with this massive wall, and behind me is current HVAC design and delivery as a map for production builders. And it looks like some of the things I'm going to show you in a moment. So you can map anything. But The examples we're going to give are through the eyes of production builders, 3 different builders. So first, how do you do it? I'd say get management bought in. They're not above the fray. They're usually the biggest opportunity or culprits to either be in the room or not. So get them involved. Pick the right team. This is John Friesenan and his partner Jim in the room, head of production, head of marketing, head of purchasing. Again, pull all the key players in the room. Pick a comfortable place with a good long wall like you see there, windows, fresh air. Very often you can be in a room locked away as a team for a day or 2. So again, make sure you're in the right environment. Gather the right tools. Anyone who knows me knows I love Post-its, 3M Post-its, big pens, flip charts. Set the ground rules, you know, turn the phones off, focus while you're there, set the brakes up, and use a parking lot. There's always good ideas coming out of these sessions. They may be outside what focus you have. Park it. Good idea, but park it. So that's the first. I'm going to use this simple chart here to sort of tell you a story of process mapping and then show the examples. So I like to call them the big buckets or the big things. What is it you are breaking down? Break it down in a few pieces, and I'll walk through this. For any process, if you were making sausages, you have inputs. In that case, it might be pieces of pigs or a machine to make it or a person to grind it, money, what have you. And then outputs, got sausages. And along the way, you've got things you've got to do. So let's go into that. So first, the outputs. What are you trying to do? Maybe improve product design or saving some money. In this case, these are the kind of things typically we'll hear a builder say. I want more closings. How many? I want a high quality home. Against what metric? Happier customers will improve my satisfaction 5 points. Fewer defects, etc. So you always ask, what's at the end of the process? When we've finished, if we're successful, what have we got? Next, what do we need before the sausage machine starts? What's the input? In this case, we've got to have the right people. We've got to have time to be able to do it. It's going to cost us X. Physical sticks and bricks, what we build, etc. So again, for any process, what's in, what's out? Define that as a team. Next, what are you trying to map? What big thing is it you're going to break down? Is it the company? Is it, in your case, Betsy, your program development arm? If it's, we'll hear from Lydia, the sales and marketing that Thrive. What is it you're breaking down? Is it a product? Is it a service? Decide it as a team. Next thing then, when you know that, break it down in what I call 3, 4, 5 sub-buckets or subsets here. What are the things that make up that big thing? Is it a department then, if it's the company? You're mapping the 4 to 5, 6, 7 key departments. Or if it's a product, what are the sub-elements of it or process? Next. Then when you've defined those bigger buckets, start now, this is where the real work comes in. What are the things we do? What are the work steps? What's the activity? Who, and then you can really analyze and delay this. Who owns that thing, that step? How long does it take us? How much does it cost? What value does that thing do to our customer or our business? What are the issues? Let's brainstorm the needs to improve. Often, this is where the magic comes, the integration or the getting away from the silos. What overlap do we have with other teams in the company? Looking at it through the customer's eyes or new solutions. So I'll give you some examples of this. So that's a key one. Then when you've done this exercise, how the hell do you rank the ideas? So I mentioned it earlier. List the ideas, then ask structured questions. What's the value of that idea to the different stakeholders? how hard would it be to implement that idea? And then you can start tabulating them, and I'll show you this. So you're not just pulling ideas from wherever. You've formally seen them. And then define your action plan. Let's look at those.
And I think this to me has always been valuable because we've looked at this on the Alliance side too. Sometimes you fall in love with an idea, or you think there's something that you really need to do and somebody's really passionate about it. But if you make it really rigorous and functional the way that they have to rate it, they can't argue with the numbers that come about. So I think I found it very helpful to get alignment on that front.
It's a good reference point for, whether, like we said earlier, is that the best idea or this one to put the money in? So let me walk through a few examples. You can see, as Betsy likes to point out that that's an old photograph because I'm not as dark-haired as that. But you see the room, good room. This is all mapped out, and let me delay some of these. First example, many of these, but this was an example we did a few years ago with Bill Rectanis from Thrive. And we'll bookend this with Elitia Thrive Homes because they changed the name. They were originally Newtown Builders. And one of the outcomes from this session was a brand change. But these fancy flip charts, I call them, the templates, they'll be available through Betsy and the website. But there's simple ways to delay. So the first thing, what are you trying to do? So Bill and his team said they wanted home quality improved, customer satisfaction, lead the marketplace in Denver in high performance homes, etc. So just like I showed you earlier, these are big things, and then they broke them down on these flip charts. What will we need to be successful? The execs have got to buy in, the right team and the desire and attitude, etc. So you can see here, again, the kind of things, and then you'd fill them in for your project. What are the activities? So for Bill, if you click, he wanted to map the whole business from community developing, purchasing, all the way to customer service. And by getting the team then to break down the next subset, you'll see the kind of things here in construction, permits, vendors, building, that's physically the building of the home. And you can break that down in a lot more detail. But because they were mapping the company level, we kept it up at a high enough level. So it wasn't minute of each of the departments. They wanted to analyze their whole process and improve the quality. So the brainstorming would be, what are the essentials for each of these? What issues have we got? And then what improvement opportunities are there? So I'm scanning that quickly just again to show how the generic one can be applied to a builder. This is another example. John Laing Homes, they wanted inter-department communication, deliver high quality home, etc., etc. This is their head of their Denver group. And part of this was they wanted to sell the business. They sold it for $1 billion to a group from the UAE. Not because of this process, but again, part of getting the business aligned to be better. Now you can see Glenn, another colleague with dark hair there, but breaking down their their main steps of their process and duration, issues, the little frowny you see there. So getting a common pattern here, breaking it down with those Post-it notes. Here, what they did the same process as Newtown, the 7 big phases along the top, break the company, the work steps, and then I'll show you a little deeper looking at the marketing group. I don't expect you to read it, but this is a way for the marketing and sales process to be broken down, and they wanted to map the customer relationship and know specifically what they can do to improve issues they have today. So this would be an example of a 12, 14-page report out that becomes part of an action plan. Now, how did they pick the ideas to work on? So like I showed you earlier, You've got your ideas listed down here, and all of these templates are in the we provided through the Alliance website. Yep. Fill in the blanks yourself then. So what ideas? Who are the stakeholders? So marketing group, corporate divisions, the customer, the brand, etc. How easy, and then people rank them 1 low, 5 high. How easy or hard would it be to implement? Some great ideas, 20, 25, but medium base. So then you transfer that over into a quadrant, opportunity matrix, we call it. So plotting the low to high value, low to high implementation. And that quadrant there, we call it the low-hanging fruit. If you got high-value ideas that are easy to do them tomorrow. The ones on the top right are usually harder. They're more strategic. So opportunity matrix, now bring it to Alicia, and we can bring it home and talk through how did that process I've just gone through work for them. So same thing. Gene Myers, many of you know him, and Bill Rectanus and their leadership team wanted to improve several aspects of their business. They asked George and I and Glenn if we'd come and help them. So this was a 2-day session. You can see one of the walls there fully mapped the whole business. Lydia on the lower left is going to join us in a sec there with a pink sweater. Next. These are some of the examples of documentation. You'll hear that construction was one of the core things they wanted to focus on. I won't share the dirty laundry. Everybody has ways to improve. There were a lot of things here that Gene and Bill and the team wanted to improve. Another on the construction. Another one was on the home buyer journey, the journey map. And when George understood what they were doing or wanted to do, he'd already helped and worked with Rich Rodriguez, one of his process guru buddies who's been at different building companies with George, who's at Donnell Homes. And they'd had a wonderful journey map mapped out. And this is showing the consumer's role in the journey map. And then other subsets showed what the Thrive's team would do. So with that, let me, I've finished the generic what is it. Let's now get the real scoop from the inside view. And George has played a role along with Glenn helping them. And I'll throw it over to George.
So I think first, let me go to Lydia, because she has lived through this from being out in a sales office to running their sales organization. And I'd love to get Lydia's kind of thoughts of before and after and what it was like going through this change process.
Hi. So I'll say before we went through this, the process mapping exercise, it just felt out of control, just felt a little chaotic. There was a lot of uncertainty, and on the sales floor, you have to, in order to gain trust from customers, you have to provide a certain level of certainty, and we just weren't able to do that at the time. So we just wanted to, in an effort to achieve operational excellence, we, and obviously working closely with George, we determined that process mapping was essential to Thrive's daily business practices. And, since we have implemented a lot of the things that we did during the process mapping, it has made Thrive's it's become one of our most valuable improvement tools. And during the mapping session, we were able to, put a spotlight on waste, reduce costs, or see how to get there. It just kind of, it is a roadmap. And with us being in one of those, within the red section that was shown on an earlier slide, affordability is also what we were chasing as well. And we were able to figure out how to get there by doing the process mapping.
And Lydia, one of the things that came out of the process mapping and exercise was to help make the whole experience better.
Yes.
You also simplified. You took what was an infinite option list and simplified down to a very simple list of standard options from which you did not deviate.
Exactly.
How hard was that to implement inside of a sales staff that was used to giving people anything they wanted?
I think that it's so funny that we think that people want choice. We think that they want to, have tons of selections, and that wasn't the case. We kind of sat down and we tried to figure out why our customer satisfaction wasn't there. And after reading tons and tons of surveys, our customers were saying it's overwhelming, it's inconvenient, we're unsure, it's providing us uncertainty. Your model shows this, and we went and found out that it's this much more, and it wasn't providing the transparency and level of commitment that our customers needed. So on the sales floor, of course, change is scary for a lot of people, but in doing the process mapping and just seeing that we needed to simplify our processes, simplify the options, it's made a huge difference. And also, the thing that it also helped with was us being able to help our construction team, because so often the design center is only open, Monday through Friday, and someone would have to take off work and they can't do this. And so it was slowing down the construction process, which then, the homes were delayed because we were waiting on the paperwork or tile. So it was also adding to the customer's dissatisfaction.
Yeah. So what's the next thing you think you ought to be working on?
You're always working on something. Cycle time was a huge task, and we're always looking to improve our cycle time. And we actually just celebrated yesterday. We have a community that, there's always every builder has that community that's just a little tough. This particular community had a cycle time that was pretty hefty. It was in the 300s. And yesterday, just looking at a closing, we were able to reduce that community's average cycle time to right under 200. So we're always finding things to work on, just how to, just kind of see where you want to improve, map it, and then measure it. And it's never ending.
So would you say that this whole thing of looking at the improvements and then having a methodology of looking at the process, changing the process, new process, is kind of embedded in the culture now?
Of course, absolutely. And it also has helped break down the silos. As Michael mentioned earlier, you realize your impact on other departments. So if you see that something's not working, it's awesome to get into a room, map it out, and go and tackle it.
Great. Michael?
We do have a question. I'm just going to interject because it's been sitting here for a few minutes. But someone would like to hear about accountability when it comes to the customer journey or other processes. How to manage who's responsible for each step in the process. So thoughts?
One thing that we have done in the process map, well, I'll back up a little bit. Back to ownership, we actually we created a new position within our company, and it was the VP of Process Control and Improvement. And that just gave it someone that's tracking it and just always knew where things stood and just kind of owned our entire process. So as far as accountability on the sales side, in conjunction with construction and customer service, with our surveys, if a customer replies and says they're upset about warranty not calling within a certain time and something's been outstanding, we've been able to, you own this department, so you need to tackle, getting back to that customer and then getting back to the team and updating them. So I think that just when you have an owner of each department, it's so much easier to have that accountability and just start that way. Who owns this? Okay, well, when this happens, X, Y, Z happens. So it's just making sure, or assigning an owner of each task, or however you want to define it.
If I could kick in here, Michael mentioned earlier, Rich Rodriguez, that when we were at Weston in Florida, we actually created a map that had across the top the functions, pre-sale, contract signing, design selection, so on and so forth, all the way to closing and post-closing. And down the left side were people, was the sales manager, the customer first, sales manager, design selection coordinator, title insurance person, construction superintendent, so on and so forth. And each of those boxes for each phase was that person's responsibility. That chart became part of our contract that we did with a customer. That upfront, sitting with them, we went through, this is the journey that it takes to go from now until you're in your home, and actually after you're in your home. Along the way, we have responsibilities, but you have them also. And in signing this contract, you are acknowledging that you will perform your responsibilities in the time and manner that's set, just like we'll do ours. If we have that agreement, then we can go ahead and build your home. If we don't, then we don't have alignment, and maybe we shouldn't be your builder. That chart was brought out, and it went with the agreement of sale all the way through the process. And every time a customer sat down at design selection, at their pre-walk of their house, closing of their house, that came out, and the first thing was done. Here we are. Here's what you're supposed to do. Here's what I'm supposed to do at this point. You agreed to this beforehand. Here we are. Now let's go ahead and do it. That whole thing of the communication of expectation up front was the key thing that actually allowed the process to flow smoothly, and people could say, I didn't know, or I want to do something different.
Nice.
Thanks, George. And thanks, Olivia. Great. I know we had fun when we were there. We laughed a lot. It was hard work, but we had a lot of fun in Denver that time. So thanks for joining us. So again, George and Olivia brought it home through the builder's eyes. I was just trying to show you some of the generic. What is process mapping, why you do it, how you do it. But believe me, you can do it for anything. If folks on the phone here, product manufacturers, you're looking to innovate a new product, you can use it then. If you're an architect looking to improve the design process, you can do that. If you put in business development, you're creating a proposal for the client, you can dig deeper into it using process. So it can be an hour long, a week long, a year long. So what are you trying to do? It can definitely improve your business. Do we have any other questions we can answer for folks?
Not at the moment. I think we filtered most of them in. Like I said earlier, if anyone comes up with anything, when we get this out to you, we'll also give you contact information for the internal speakers. And then just so we don't flood Lydia with requests, we'll just ask you to send any questions you might have for her or for Thrive our way, so we can filter those for you. But we'll just, we've got a couple more things to share, and then we'll...
Yeah, just to wrap, again, it took several years of training at GE. You're not going to learn it in 1 hour, but hopefully this whetted your appetite for wanting to try it. Some simple things you can do. That book, I highly recommend, Quality Essentials. The best book on process and quality I've read is The Goal. It's a novel by Elia Goldratt. It's a brilliant book, and I highly recommend you. It's not a nerdy book. It's a great novel, but you'll get the fundamentals of quality, process, business improvement from that. And there was another one, The Ice Cream Maker. i6sigma.com is a good website, a lot of good materials there. I know Glenn on our team helps the National Housing Quality Award program. Jean and Thrive, as one of the builders, I think the last couple of years have applied for that. If you're a builder and interested in improving your business, that's a good program. Just what you get out of it will improve your business. Betsy, I know, likes Mind Genius as a group where you brainstorm, and Flowchart, some tools there. If you Google process mapping, you'll find a lot of good stuff. And then the templates we showed you earlier, from the outputs, inputs, breaking them down, make them available.
All of Michael's fancy Post-it note images. We'll make those available, but without sharing any of Thrive or any of the other builders.
No, we'll take those out.
But those are all available in one PDF that will allow you to download as well on our website. And many of you have repeatedly answered or asked us about whether the slides are going to be available. Yes, all but a couple, just so you can't look at the nitty-gritty detail of some of the builders' maps. And then we'll also be posting a video archive as well.
And I know, Betsy, you're always looking for ideas on webinars. I know Glenn on the Perform team here at IBACOS has been mapping out quality assurance programs for production builders. So if enough people were interested, I think we could talk him into maybe doing a similar 60-minute.
Yep, and that would be quality management focused through the process.
Yeah, new QA program. So I'd like to say thank you, Betsy, helping plan it, George and Lydia for helping me give it. And whoever asked back in Baltimore, what is it? Can you tell? So hopefully this was helpful. And again, the model for the Alliance, whenever you want to learn things, if we or whoever we know in our community has the stuff or knows the stuff, we'll share it with you. So it was my pleasure today with you guys.
Yes, thank you, Michael. Thanks, George. Thanks, Lydia. Thanks for everybody participating today. One last thing, some shameful plugs of other stuff that we've got coming up. If you've been to our summit before, it's a 2.5-day event. It's scheduled for April in Nashville. Be sure to put that on your agenda. We'll have more and more details over the next several weeks coming out about our next big live event, which is a roundtable event in Denver. So we're going to be in the backyard of Thrive again. And that's November 12th and 13th. The first half day is going to be tours and an evening networking event. And the second day is going to be a full day deep dive focused on what we need to do as an industry to drive attainability for that missing middle. We're, as I said earlier, putting together, I think it is, a roadmap related to attainability in housing that will have a lot of assets and resources related to that. This event is really one of the kickstarters for that roadmap and those resources. So love to see you guys there. And if you're interested in seeing innovation in the field, we do things called road trips. And we don't get in a car with an inner tube or anything, but we do have a lot of fun. You can ask some of the people who've come with us. But those are usually an in and out event, 1 day or a day and a half in an area where we see innovation in the field, private tours with folks, and then we do some small group networking. So those are great opportunities as well. And on that front, the 27th of July, we have a phone call. So it's really taking input from you guys as our community on what you would like to see on road trips in the field. And we're going to share with you what we're planning for this fall, but it will drive what we do in the fall this year, as well as all the road trips that we're looking for next year as well. And check out our stories about exciting women in housing called Her Stories in Housing. It's on an ongoing basis. We're always looking to get more inclusive as a community. So if you know of someone who should be featured, please reach out to us and let us know. But again, thank you for participating today. And wow, I'm on the dot. That's some good process mapping.
Well done.
Management. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks again.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Betsy. Thanks all.